Well, we are back. It's the BAC podcast with me, Stuart Newman, joined as always by Neill and Ian Briggs. It's been a crazy few months, gentlemen. With restrictions lifting, we've been busy at all manner of events around the world, and it's actually the first time we've all been in the UK for a podcast. So, welcome back, Ian.
Yeah, nice to be here. Actually, it's amazing. I got into the rhythm of knowing where my microphones and where everything was, and now we're all together, but we have to be in separate rooms so we don't get feedback, and it's all like new land again. So, but good to be here, that's for sure.
Good. So this time around, it's the experience episode as we dive into some of the best mono driving stories from around the world and find out the experiences and indeed the cars that inspired the boys long before mono existed. So if we're all ready, let's get into it. I'm going to start this episode with a bit of a story of my own. So when I first met Ian Briggs, way back in, must have been 2016, I said, "Hello, mate, nice to meet you. I really love your car." To which he responded, "Well, it's not really a car, but thanks, mate." And I remember I sat there, I thought to myself, how could I possibly have got that wrong of all the things about the car to get wrong? So please do fill me in once again and tell me how mono sort of redefines driving, I guess.
It's Neill and I set out to design let's call it a vehicle rather than a car that was only about driving, and it didn't fulfill the transport function. So forgive me if I've said this before, but the car industry is going through a very disruptive phase. Obviously, the way most people use a car, including ourselves, most of the time, it has a pure transport function. And if you imagine 10, 15 years in the future, they'll be autonomous, they may be battery powered, we may not even own them. That's where transport's going. And the transport network has been disrupted in the past before, when 150 years ago, when the horse was transport and the car disrupted it and became transport. There was a time when buying a horse, you'd be thinking about practical things like ploughing a field and pulling a carriage and things like that. Well, when the car replaced it as transport, then the horse became a luxury sporting good for people who want to go riding. And that's what Neill and I felt was missing. In the same way, you don't pick a Shire horse that can do a bit of everything. You'll pick one that's good for jumping, or you pick one that's good at racing or cross country or whatever it is you want to do with it. And we wanted a car that was as focused as that. I said the word car again, didn't I? I just feel like it automatically puts everything into a box, which is not the box that mono's not in. I mean, we firmly believe at BAC that in the future, there's going to be cars as transport, which you might use in the same way you use a train or a plane today. You might not even own it. You just look on the schedule, or you call it up, it arrives, you get in, it takes you to work, it takes you home. But if you love driving in the same way people love skiing, in the same way people love parachuting and canoeing and all the other sports they do, then you're going to want a piece of equipment which is purposely designed for that and doesn't have any legacy of transport. And that's why I always try and think of it not as a car and use other words, but trip over myself sometimes, as I just did.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's so many different things in terms of when you drive that are totally unique with mono, and the obvious one is the fact that you're sat in the middle of the car, and the visibility actually that you have, and the vision that you have is completely, you can almost see through 360 degrees if you look over your shoulders left and right. There's no A pillars or B pillars or rear view mirrors, and actually when you get in a regular car, it's surprising just how many restrictions and things there are in the way of your vision. That's the first thing. When you get in the car, you feel like you're sat in something, but you very much have this connection with the outside world. And of course, when you start moving, it's not normal that you would experience, the rush of the wind as you would do in a regular car. So you're taken from an environment where, you're very much insulated to the experience, first of all, in many ways. And then from there, of course, there's the connection of the man and the machine in terms of the directness the connection via the made-to-measure seat, the steering wheel, of just how well connected you are to this machine. And it's only when you drive a regular car and you perhaps drive spiritedly down a country lane and you just realize how much you're sliding around in the seat, how much you're actually gripping the steering wheel to try and keep you in position, that you realize, as Ian said, that there's this element of doing things properly and doing things, specifically for the sport or the hobby of driving. And, you don't wear ski boots that flop around on your feet, You don't wear jackets that you get freezing cold when you go mountaineering, or you go walking, or you go cycling, or whatever. Everything has to have a purpose, and it starts by having the right connection to the vehicle, and then from there, obviously, there's everything to do with how the car steers, how it brakes, how it turns, how it corners, how it transitions. When you're going into a corner, off the brakes, towards the apex, when you get on the throttle, off the throttle, all these different things then become quite simple in terms of a target, because everything is just a logical progression from that purest connection that you have as a driver in a machine.
So that, have the experience in mind, and of course the future in mind, what do you think? Are we going to see more cars like Mono from other manufacturers? Like, is that going to be if that's going to be the future of transport, it's going to be the future of driving as a sport? Is Mono going to be sort of one of many cars that are like it?
I would say yes. I not to be too immodest, but I think we're leading the charge in that direction. You start to see it now. Some companies are dipping their toe into the water of track only cars. In my opinion, they still have a legacy of transport because they're based on their road car kind of counterpart. But I do think that's going to happen. If you just take the extremes, what would everyone do if they could afford it and they were wealthy enough? They'd sit in a nice Rolls Royce with a chauffeur and he'd take them to work in the morning, or he'd pick them up from the restaurant once they've had a drink or something. An autonomous self-driving car can do that for you. So companies like Mercedes and Audi, BMW, all these types of Rolls Royce, of course, it's clear where they can fit into that world. You're also going to have people who just want to inexpensively get to work. They've got just a normal life. So, they could jump in a little smart car that arrives outside, you jump in, it takes you to it. You can very clearly see where certain manufacturers and certain brands will fit into that world. But the challenge is for companies like Porsche and Ferrari, how do they fit into that world, really? Everyone wants to drive the Ferrari. No one wants to be chauffeur driven in a Ferrari. So where does a self-driving Ferrari fit in? And if it's just about driving, then why do you need place for golf clubs and passengers and all the other things? So those companies do have a challenge, but I think they will. I think they will answer that challenge, and probably. I think what's going to happen is the industry is going to very much diverge and be two very much extremes. Very much just transport, very much just driving as a sport. And I think they'll all adapt, and you will see way more of the type of car that Mono is, whether it's a single seat, whether you sit in the middle, how they solve those problems. It's an exciting time, but I do think you will, yes.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that completely. And actually, if you look at already in recent times, obviously Ferrari have launched cars like the Monza and things like that, where there's a single seat version and a 2-seat version. McLaren with the Elva, of course, and these are cars that are completely exposed, no windows, no doors, and they're trying to make that purest driver and machine connection somewhat clumsily, in my opinion, because fundamentally they've started off with what was a 2-seat GT supercar. And they've tried to develop something that is ultimately compromised. So you end up with dare I say, none of the benefits. So you've ended up with a 1,600, 1,800 kilo 2-seat car. So you haven't got the effects of the lightweight or the central driving position or anything else that allows you as a vehicle architecture. And at the same time, you've got the slightly negative connotations of being exposed to all the elements. But interestingly, as Ian says, these are manufacturers that are dipping their toe in the water of this more and more extreme vehicle that is leaning more towards just enjoying the driving experience. And of course, you've got cars like the Senna, and then the Senna GTR, which isn't even road legal, which are monstrous cars in terms of performance. And then it goes even further than that, with some of the latest offerings from Bugatti, which are going to be track only. And then that starts to bring us into it's not just about the man and the machine and the driving experience, it's actually about the community. So if I'm going to buy one of these cars, whatever it may be, and Ferrari started it with the FXX program many years ago, again, by buying purist race cars that you can't drive on the road. You don't even take delivery of the cars, in fact, in that particular program. So, people want to be with like-minded individuals who share the same passions. They're on a certain level in society, and that's where the whole element of community comes in, of people who share the same ideals. And of course, that's existed for many years with lots of different ownership clubs, whether it's the classic sports car club of MGs and Morgans or something at one end, and Ferraris and McLarens and Porsches at the other end. But I think what's starting to evolve now, Lamborghini have just launched their new extreme ownership program. Ferrari have had theirs for many years. McLaren have the pure McLaren system, and of course we have the mono owners club. And I think where it's going to go is that people will be part of these clubs as they evolve, because that will be their golf club, that will be their social club, that will be their club where they go, and ultimately they're mixing with their friends, their mates, they're making new friendships, new experiences, and making new memories. And that's what it's all about. And for us, the car ticks that box because it works brilliantly on the road, it works brilliantly on the track, and it provides a very, very unique experience on both the road and the track. You don't have to be pulling 2G under braking or setting new lap records as such. You can really just enjoy the car almost as an adventure from A to B whenever you're driving the car, and particularly when you're part of the club.
I think it's worth pointing out there as well, though. I know in some discussions with people, they're saying, I'd like, if my mate gets one, I'd love to get one as well. It's a little bit the way I used to think when I had a motorcycle. If you're the only person amongst your circle of friends with a motorcycle, then you do just end up going on a ride on your own, which isn't great. So you want your mates to have motorcycles as well. But of course, all your mates don't have to have monos, so you can go and drive. When I used to go up to the Nürburgring in my Lotus, I had friends with Porsches and Ferraris and all kinds of things, and we'd all just head up there, each of us in our own car with our overnight bag on the passenger seat. That's where the whole idea started. Thinking, I don't need all this space. I don't. It's just a waste, and it's compromising the car. But just to make that point, that if you're a mono owner, yes, ultimately, driving with 10 or 15 other monos through the Alps is the ultimate dream. But if your friend's got a Porsche and your other friend's got a Lamborghini, you can still go for a drive. You can still go for a blast across the moors on a Sunday morning and meet for a coffee and chat. You can still have that social time. People think that in a way it's almost lonely driving mono. Well, it isn't. And it's no more lonely than skiing. You sit on the lift, you go up, you're chatting with people, you meet them in the cafe, you're having a chat. But when you put your goggles on, when you push off, that's when you're doing your sport. And that's when you want to concentrate anyway. And I think it was Ollie, I can't remember the phrase he used. What was the phrase Ollie used?
Automotive therapy.
Yeah. And this sense of being isolated a little bit in the moment when you're driving, when you don't want SMSs and WhatsApp messages and all the rest of it. To have that moment of concentration to yourself, but everything that led up to it and everything that comes after it is a social experience. So you can do it with other vehicle owners as well as mono owners,
as many of our owners do. I mean, you've got communities like Supercar Driver. We've got several owners who are part of that community, and they'll be sharing drives across the moors or wherever with people with all the different cars that Ian mentioned. And I think the other thing as well is that it's a bit like anything in life. You make your own decisions. Some people like being on their own. Some people like playing golf on their own. Some people like skiing and snowboarding on their own. Some people prefer skiing to snowboarding. So it doesn't matter that whether you've got a mono or a Porsche or a mono or a Ferrari or whatever. It's people who like to spend time, doing what they do and doing what they enjoy. That's the most important thing.
Okay, we're going to run something just a little bit different now, as I'm going to put you very much on the spot, which is my job, of course. So Mono is obviously shaped to provide the best driving experience possible. But what I want you guys to do is pick, let's say the 3 best attributes from 3 different cars, past or present, to make your dream car. So it could be the engine, it could be the gearbox, it could be the design, if you like, Ian. Whatever you think enhances the experience for a dream collective. Go.
Crikey. Well, I don't know where to start. I'll start with a mundane one. We always like the positioning of our pedals in our Lotus Elises, and the pedals spacing in a BAC mono measure the same. The position of the brake in relation to the throttle pedal and the clutch are the same. It may, at some point you have to put pen to paper, and that seemed to make sense. I do think, being a relatively modest car, but the Lotus Elise I think was great. It didn't have any servo assisted brakes and it didn't have servo assisted steering. And I think Neill would also agree they both had, certainly the early ones had the ceramic brakes. The pedal effort, the throttle pedal effort, the steering, just the balance of control was great on that car. You could get in it and within a couple of minutes you drove it like you'd owned it for a long time. Certain cars you'll be changing gear a bit jerky, or when you turn you get more than you expected, or you don't get as much as you expected. I think that one of the great things Lotus did on the Elise was they got the controls all nicely balanced, and it just worked really well.
That sounded like more than one attribute. That I don't know. That was pedals, controls, etc.
Almost like accessibility, almost in many ways. I mean, we talk about all the various different attributes on the car, many of which Ian mentioned there, being in harmony. So, and I think that car was a perfect example of how it looked, its performance, and how it drove in terms of its steering and its response, and how all the pedal efforts were matched to the level of steering response and steering effort and so on. So I think it was very much a landmark car in that sense. I think for me to change tack slightly, and if we could have the engine noise of this particular car that I'm going to mention, then that would make mono even better. And that was I had the pleasure of driving around the Hungaroring a 458 Speciale Ferrari, revving to 9,500 RPM. The emotion from that V8 engine, just incredible. So for me, I know where the rest of the world is heading with regards to electrification and so on and so forth. But I think the sound of that V8 is absolutely iconic. So for me, I would definitely have an engine that makes something like that particular noise. Of course, if you're talking engine notes, there's other race cars of note, certain Group C Jaguars and of course the famous Mazda that Johnny Herbert won in at Le Mans with the Wankel engine and how that sounded. So certainly a powertrain noise from one of those 3 cars for me would definitely be in the dream car.
I definitely agree with Neill on I agree with them all actually, but I definitely agree with the Wankel motor. If there was a modern way of doing that the way that screamed, that engine. There was a concept car actually done by Mazda called the Furai, which used the same 3-rotor Wankel motor, and there's some great online videos. Unfortunately, it burned during a Top Gear filming that car. It's only one in the world, and it doesn't exist anymore. But if you watch the videos of just put Furai sound, Furai. The sound's incredible. So I agree with that. It's funny, when I imagined mono, I always imagined being in it, and I put a huge emphasis on how I feel when I'm in it. I'm just over 6 foot, but I've actually got for my height, I've got slightly taller body and slightly shorter legs. I tend to sit too high in cars. Very often I get in a car and I feel like I'm sitting on it. And to be able to get into a car and feel like you're down in it is important to me. And that's another thing from the Lotus, the high sides and the narrow glass. I mean, there's legal limitations about how high the side can be. I mean, for visibility and things, but mono's on the limit, as you would expect. But that sense of being in a car and how it holds you, how it fits you, and all the rest of it. And so there's not many cars that encompass you as in the same way a single seater can. So there's nothing that really gave me that exact same feeling, but it was a feeling I always craved. You know, the closer everything is, the more, you know, people talk about fighter cockpit, and you know, they'll wrap the dash around the driver so the gear lever's a bit closer and things like that. But they're all just kind of trying to get towards that feeling, but there's no other way than sit in the middle and get the cockpit sides up, get the steering wheel up level with your nose, and just sit down in it and just be completely in control. Sorry, we got a little bit off the subject there, but it is attributes in a way, because how it makes you feel, it's how the steering responds, how the brakes respond. You know, just for your benefit, you imagine if you had to press the brake, the accelerator pedal really hard to make the car accelerate, but you just tap the brakes and you know, it's like locking the wheels. That'd be an extreme version of things that aren't in harmony. So I know Neill puts a lot of emphasis on that, and I do too, and that was why I jumped straight to pedals. Engine, of course, steering.
Have you got a Lotus Elise by any? I know you used to have one. Have you?
We used to. We both had one. We had 97. We both had two identical titanium Elises. In fact, the only difference was, I think, on the silver cars, they did dark logos, and on the darker cars, they did silver logos. And I think there was a little bit of discrepancy about what colour logo you put on a titanium car, because it's right in the middle tonally. And I think because they knew they were going to two brothers. Neill got silver logos and I got dark grey logos on our titanium cars. Otherwise, they were identical.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, just to finish off then, in terms of attributes, obviously I mentioned the engine. I think in terms of power delivery and how an engine would, you know, deliver its power. I mean, I drive an i8 on a daily basis, and the combination of how in sport mode, how the electric motors work with the engine. There's just this relentless torque, from instantaneous torque from when you pull away, all the way through the rev range. And I think certainly as we move towards certainly electric motors, and as the world moves towards that's the appeal of the instantaneous torque, I guess. Obviously there's no emotion there with the sound, and that's why I think certainly the hybrid solution has been favoured by people like McLaren and others, because you do get that instantaneous accessibility of performance. And it is relentless in many cases. These cars are also turbocharged as well. So I think for me, actually using a hybrid system in a slightly clever way would be something that would be more of an ultimate for me. So at the moment, the way a hybrid system is utilised is they use the electric motor in the area where the internal combustion engine is particularly inefficient and dirty, actually, which is chiefly to pull away, and up to a certain speed the electric motors are working, and then it's engine, or purely engine rather. For me, I think that there's an opportunity there to use almost the electric motor as almost like a push to pass system. So you'd have it as it currently is, but you'd also then utilize it with this push to pass, almost like a fan boost, almost, if you like, to use the electric motor where you could have another 10, 15, 20 seconds if you were on track or wherever, and you wanted that additional power to somehow try and link that in. So that's something that no one's doing at the moment, but that would certainly be something that I'd gravitate towards moving forward.
It's funny, actually, when you talk about the way power is delivered. I've always liked little lightweight cars, and I've never owned a V8 car. I know Neill has a few. I've always liked small engines. I loved the way when I raced go-karts, as Neill did, the way a two-stroke single-speed go-kart accelerates. It it pushes, the more it revs, the harder it pushes you, and I love that feeling. And just to plug Mono R, I mean, that's what I love about Mono R over the Mono W. Just the harder it revs, the harder it pushes you. It's the sense of I'm on the back of this wild animal. That's how the go-kart felt. You come out of a hairpin, they might feel a little bit bogged down, and it just goes more and more and more. And the more it revs, the more and more, and the quicker it revs, and it just feels like, wow, this is this runaway thing, you know. And that's an attribute in a motor I'd like. The opposite of that is, you know, a modern turbo diesel, where it just seems like it gives you everything and then it just wanes away. It kind of makes promises it doesn't really keep as the revs rise, you know.
For people wondering what Mono W is, that's our internal designation for the original Mono, let's call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. So some amazing cars, some amazing attributes, Ferraris, BMWs, or just for Ian, a Lotus Elise, basically. So that's very good.
With a 2-stroke engine. No, actually, I'll take that. I'd take a little 2-litre V8 or a rotary engine.
It is now time for our special guest of episode 5, and someone who knows a little something about mono ownership. It's the chairman of the Mono Owners Club himself, Mr. Alex Nauk.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Alex,
Hello,
how's
mate.
it going?
Hey, Alex.
Not too bad. How are you?
Very, very good. It's a pleasure having you on, mate, the chairman of the Mono Owners Club himself. So obviously today we're talking about mono ownership and how people use their cars. And I believe that you are actually the highest mileage mono owner, which I hope, if my research is correct, and sometimes it isn't. What does being a mono owner actually mean to you?
Well, coming to the mileage, I'm still battling a little bit, arguing with Ollie Webb a little bit. So he still argues that he has the most mileage. But I don't know how many times the mileage has been turned back on the ISO cars. So
He's got the more. You've definitely got more road miles than him. He might have more track miles than you, but you've definitely got more road miles. No question.
Probably, yeah. So what does it mean? I have to explain a little bit more from my side. I come from motorbike riding, so I met Ian actually at a track day when we both had our MV Agustas. So I was always into motorbike. My first drivable thing was a scooter, and then I went to motorbike history and racing and track days and everything. And then one day he told me he's gonna build a car, and I was like, yeah, okay, build a car. and when I first drove it, I mean, it was freezing cold in November sometime in England, and I thought, wow, that's probably the closest thing you can get on 4 wheels to a motorbike. So the power, the lightness, the agility, and everything. So yeah, that's basically what it was for me in the beginning. And now that I've driven so many miles, it still is. It is driving a motorbike on 4 wheels and having the advantage of a car and the advantage of a motorbike. Just put them both together and enjoy it. Yeah.
So what do you use your car primarily for? Because we have a lot of owners who do different things, but I think you go to the extreme in every case, really.
Yeah, well, I'm using it basically 90% on the road, to be honest. That's why I've put some pictures on the wall here. It's some proof prints from one of our books that we do for every track day or every tour that we do. Everyone gets a book, and these are pictures from our Black Forest tour. And it's always a thing. People say, well, when I'm going to use this car, it's only for one person. You can't take anyone with you. Is it only for the track? And so I said, listen, guys, now I'm driving this car for over 30,000 kilometers now, and 90% is on the road. I'm going on small tours on the weekends or even for a week. I mean, when you come from a motorbike, you're a little bit more, used to minimalism. So you just take less stuff with you, and you can easily go on a week holiday trip with the car. So I use it mostly on the road. And then if you've got buddies coming with you, it's basically like doing a motorbike tour.
I just got to interject, because just that we don't forget that very first experience. It was pouring with rain, so to the car's credit, it still managed to make him want one, despite us having to stop in the middle of the test drive and take him into a cafe to get his fingers warm again.
Because I only had the little gloves, my racing gloves from a motorbike, thin.
But I remember when he picked up his car. I was looking at the pictures of the day of it outside the factory here, and the idea was, I suggested, why don't you just do a couple of days around North Wales, we'll get your first service out of the way, and then you can take it over to Germany. You're just not bringing it back at 500 miles, for a service. So Alex thought that was a good idea. It meant he could pick his car up from the factory and everything. And the first day he went out on his own. Phone ended up going flat, so he was lost. Ended up getting people to plug his phone in at a gas station and trying to find out where he was. And obviously all the signs are in Welsh. So he said to me after, he said, it all just looked like Cindy Crawford to me. It's all just like old consonants, all one after the other. He didn't know where the hell he was. Anyway, so the next day I said, I'll come with you. So we went out, we went up to Horseshoe Pass, and we went, there's some roads, it's quite famous amongst the motorcyclists out there. And I was in ESO 1 and he was in his own car following me. We went through the first few corners, and I know he can drive quick. I mean, I've driven around Nordschleife, me and my Lotus, him and his Porsche. He's a quick driver. He can drive. And I looked in the mirror after 2 or 3 corners. He's nowhere to be seen. So at the end of this section, I pulled over, I jumped out, went back to him. He's like, don't think you can go through that. I'm like, well, I did, mate. Listen, we're nowhere near the limit. Just trust me. Just stay 3-4 car lengths behind me and just follow me. So we turn around, off we go the other way. And he did, give him his due. He stuck with me 3 or 4 car lengths behind. I got out. I went back to him. He opened his visor. He's going, I never thought you could do that. And I never forget it. It was got to get goosebumps now when I think about it.
Amazing. Alex, so obviously you've done some incredible journeys in mono around the world. I'm actually going to open this question up to you, Neill and Ian as well. So, but what is your most epic or, most incredible driving experience that you've had behind the wheel of your car?
Well, there are definitely a lot of them.
A top 3 is fine. Go on.
Well, one is combined with one trip we did. We went on an Alpine trip where there was a gathering of many super sport cars, and it was a hell of a trip to get there. We started in Stuttgart and we ended up in the Dolomites at Seiser Alm, which is a very, very famous place in Italy. And we did a 3-day tour, I think a 2-day tour there. And in the evening, there was like a gathering of all the guys with every cars, and then they had a big party, and then they gave like trophies away. And it was, one got the farthest journey, the next one got the most expensive car, the next one, I don't know, whatever. And then now finally, the last prize for spirit of the event goes to Alex Nauk, because I was the only one who was driving in a car without a roof, with no helmet, just sunglasses on. And that kind of gave me the spirit of the event. And the second, probably most memorable thing is the drive back from that event, because we had to go from Italy back to Stuttgart in one leg. And I think at the Austrian border, it started to rain, and not like it was summer, but it was a summer, thunderstorm, just water on the road, just
like in the Bible, like in the Bible.
Like the Bible. And amazingly, I mean, we did the last leg. We did it on the highway on the German Autobahn, and the car being very light, it means that if water is that high on the Autobahn, there's a certain limit to what you want to do and how quick you want to go. And then Ian was behind with the Porsche. I was in front, and the buses keep passing me, and water was splashing around me. But you can survive a trip like that even with a car with no roof on. So that was probably one of the most extreme drive I ever had.
I took a picture of him when he got back, and the only part of his whole body that was dry, there was some creases in the back of his jeans, and when he stood up there was just some dry lines. But he said he was singing in the car, and that was super extreme. It was all day long biblical rain, but it was an adventure. But it was the other Porsche that kept our speed down. It was the other Cayman that was aquaplaning, and he got on the phone and said, "Slow down, guys." So to be fair, yeah.
No, but the other thing, I mean, what's always nice is when you're on the road. Me coming from motorbike driving is what I enjoy is when you pass bikes, they always greet you. that never happens in a car usually. Motorbike drivers greet each other on the road, but when you drive past a motorbike in a car, they never usually react. But in this car, it's like you drive up a mountain pass. The first guys that come up to you are motorbike riders because they get it. You know, they see that thing. It's light. It's pure. It's mechanical. They see all the stuff and they go like, wow, what's that? You know, hey, cool, thumbs up and everything. So that's a joyful experience coming from riding on two wheels and then seeing these guys saying, hey, cool, yeah, we've got a nice product there.
It's interesting to what we were talking about earlier. You weren't with us, Alex, but we're talking about the split in the industry of going to purely transport, which might be autonomous, self-driving, electric, whatever, and then cars for the sport of driving. Well, that's already happened in motorbikes. Really, there's nothing strange about a one-seat motorbike that guys just take out and go into the Black Forest or take it to a track day. Nothing unusual about that at all. No one looks at the latest Ducati and says, where do you put your luggage? People don't ask those questions because people know that people ride bikes just for the sake of riding a bike because they love to control it and they love that feeling of moving through the world. And that's something that's why I think motorcyclists, it does appeal to them. And I think certainly in our test drive experience, motorcyclists get very comfortable very quickly. They're used to the gearbox, they're used to the wind, they're used to wearing a helmet. Not that you have to. I mean, that's Alex is also quite extreme in that respect. I mean, I'll wear sunglasses up to legal speeds and accept the fact that if I get a bumblebee in my cheek, it'll sting. But Alex has done crazy speeds, especially on that past Masters trip. And then he looks like Sterling Moss at the end of the day because he's been not for very long, but he's been following other supercars, and he's just hit with a black face and just white eyes. But we I remember on that trip we were Alex would just leapfrog cars and I was following him in his Porsche. There's just no chance. There's no chance I could follow him. So I'd see him for the first 15-20 minutes of a drive, and then he'd just come out of hairpins. He just leapfrogs them. There was 120 cars on past Masters.
Yeah, probably.
And after 15-20 minutes, I've lost touch, and I'll catch up with him again at the next cafe or the next gas station. It really has got a lot in common with a motorcycle.
And you two, your favourite driving experiences then?
Yeah, well, I've probably got three, and the first one was Gumball, actually back in 2014, I think it was. So we were invited by Max and the team to go and do the whole event, and we kind of scratched our heads and thought, how are we actually going to make this possible? And the start was over in Ireland. They went up to Scotland, they went down to London, and then they went across and went via many cities in Europe, Budapest, and ended up in Bucharest. So we thought, right, how can we kind of be part of the rally, but do it so it's feasible, because obviously there's a lot of time invested as well. So Ollie Webb drove the van and trailer and took the car over to Ireland on the ferry. We flew over in a friend's light aircraft, and we did a big demonstration right on the start line in front of all the cameras, in front of all the people and their expensive cars. And we just felt like heroes. I mean, certainly Ollie Webb did, and I was stood there watching him, praying that he wouldn't hit anything, and thankfully he didn't. But he was basically doing like a Gymkhana style at the start of the event. Anyway, the cars started, they headed off to Scotland, and we kind of worked out that we could get the ferry back and we could then leapfrog them and arrive in London. And we got invited to do the parade down Oxford Street. And again, I don't quite know how he ends up driving the car all the time in these great places, and we're kind of stood waving at him from the side. But yeah, Ollie drove down the main high street, I think it was Oxford Street or Bond Street, I think it is, and just lined with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And I wasn't even driving the car yet. I was so excited. Eventually, I did get to drive the car when we made it to Budapest. One of our owners was there, and there was a big evening there. And also a track day at the Budapest circuit, and I had the pleasure of driving our car around the track. Never driven the track before, no practice, just straight into it. It was wet, And the organizer said, go on, Neil, you go out in the car first and see if the track is okay for the regular people to go out there. So I did. And then one of our customers, he joined us in his car. And then slowly but surely, these people started to venture out. And then in the end, everyone was out on track. And it was just great because everyone was enjoying their cars, irrespective of whether it was a Lamborghini or a Porsche, Ferrari, or Rolls Royce, or whatever it was. And there we were. And I have to say, when we parked the cars up in the centre of Budapest, the reception around the car, I mean, it never ceases to amaze me. And we say that it's always the centre of attention with the central driving position, but it is. And per Alex's point, I think spectators or onlookers have preconceived ideas about a certain type of individual who drives a certain type of car, whether that's a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or a Porsche. And there are certain personality traits of people who drive certain cars, of course. And there's no preconceived ideas of who you are, whether you're rich, whether you're famous, whether whether you're flamboyant or not. If you drive a mono, I think there's this instantaneous respect when they see the car, and the first question they want to know is what is it? And back in 2014, the car was nowhere near as famous as it is now. So that's not the usual question now. When you get out the car, it's how fast is it? How much fun is it to drive? Etc. And people just want to know about the car. So that was a brilliant trip. We actually ended up driving all the way to Bucharest for the finish of the event. So that was a real adventure. A lot of driving, a lot of fun, and some great enjoyment on both the road and the track. I think my other memorable event was the Black Forest Tour, which we did in amongst lockdowns and not lockdowns, and which we managed to shoehorn an event in. And it was my first event actually that I'd been on, just because of timings and schedules. I'd never attended one of the club events, and it was just memorable in so many respects. I mean, one of the best times was driving over the top of a ski resort at 2,000 feet plus, whatever it was, meters, maybe higher. There was 8 or 10 monos, and there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people watching us, and we were doing like 20 miles an hour. We'd just driven up the side of this mountain. Great roads. We were driving spiritedly but safely, just enjoying the roads. And it was just great, meeting owners that you'd seen as a name on their car when it was in build, meeting some of these people for the first time, seeing these owners getting together for the first time who are now formed friendships. That was great. So looking forward to next year's events being announced. It's going to be really cool. And then I think finally for me is I can't not mention the Isle of Man, which we've done several times now as almost like our home event. So we catch the ferry from here in Liverpool, or we start here at the factory, catch the ferry from here in Liverpool, down there on the waterfront, straight over to the Isle of Man. And it's, if ever anywhere was made to enjoy mono, it's the Isle of Man, with obviously de-restricted roads, a mixture of obviously there's the Isle of Man TT course, which again is public road, de-restricted in many areas, and then there's also a track which we also enjoy, which is its own self-contained track up at Derby. So I think for me, between Gumball, the Black Forest Tour, and the Isle of Man Tour, they're probably 3 of my major highlights.
I've had so long now. I've got a massive list here. Don't worry, I won't. I won't bore you all to. But it's amazing all the stuff you forget, and then Neil will mention it, and you remember. Chasing the Mono Owners Club. I'm not sure which one it was, and I was in the chase car with everyone's luggage and stuff. So I'm at the back, and coming down. I wasn't even in a mono, but coming down a hill, and you can hear them all, popping and banging as they're going into the hairpin. And then they've gone around a hairpin, and they're accelerating up the other side of the valley. And I can hear the first ones are already accelerating hard, and the ones in front are braking. And it's just great to see them all. 12, 13 little insects all like chasing each other through the forest. I got to say, my very, very first time, it wasn't the actual very first time. I think I mentioned it before. I drove mono the first time in the night in a car park. But the time I properly actually drove it was around Warsaw at the Verva street race. And just briefly, it started raining. And I was in a parade and everyone was going very quick in this parade. They're all very comfortable with their car. This is the first time I've driven mono, really, apart from around a car park. But crossing 6 lanes of highway at big junctions that have all been turned into a big long sweeping corner, and you're crossing the concrete where the bus stops to the tarmac, and then the road markings and the ridges where the trucks have put indentations into the road. And it was wet, but it was just the car was just talking to you the whole time. And I remember when I came in and Neill said, "Oh, you were going quite quick there." And I said, because Neill had not driven it at this point. I said, "Wait till you drive it. It just talks to you. And you feel that little slight understeers transition into ever so slight. You can wind the lock off and you just short shift into the next gear and it pops back to a mild understeer. It was just great. So that was a great moment. There was another time. It was really early before we'd even moved to Liverpool. We showed the car at the Solitude Revival in Germany. And at the time I was traveling Monday to Friday every week. And I'd come back late on the Friday night. I'd slept most of Saturday as usual. One of our staff, Rainer, had taken the car to show it on the Saturday and I was on duty on the Sunday. So I was feeling a bit sorry for myself because I'm up at 4 a.m. on the next Monday to go back to work. I'm like, yeah. But anyway, I went there and I did my bit and to drive the car back to where it was being collected. And I just drove it. And it was the first time I'd driven without a helmet. And I didn't go quick or anything. I was tired. I was exhausted. I just drove it out through the forest, away from the event and back to where I live. And I was doing 30, 40 mile an hour, but just hearing the birds, feeling the wind in my face. Again, first time without a helmet. So I'd never done that. I'd ridden motorcycles, it was always with a helmet. I'd never traveled at that speed without having a helmet on. And it was just, and I remember thinking as I went around the corner, I was changing up and down the gears. And I just thought that this is why you do it. It was a really difficult time for Neill and I. We were trying to transition to a new factory. We were working our hearts out, and we didn't have anywhere near enough staff. And I had been feeling a bit sorry for myself, but it just reminded me why we were doing it. It was a great moment. But by far the most memorable is the Atlantic road trip. Happens every year through Norway, Scandinavia. And long story short, it was about 60, 70 cars a year I did it. We started in Copenhagen, crossed across into Norway, went up the Norwegian coast, did the Atlantic road, over the top and back down the whole full length of Sweden to Stockholm in 4 days. It was like endurance racing. It's something you'd go and do again, but while you're doing it, you're thinking, why am I doing this? Because we start at 8 a.m. and we're just driving. And there was times I didn't even get out of the car. I had a couple of guys, Pushka and another guy with me, just to help support. So they'd often be at the gas station as I arrive, and they'd just put fuel in, and I'd even get out, and then you carry on. And I remember the longest day. It was about, you'd come down a fjord, onto a ferry, cross the fjord, up the other side, over the top, down the other side, another ferry. And you're doing this all day long. Fantastic roads, nobody on them, just wonderful driving. But it got to about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm pretty tired now. I've been driving for 9 or 10 hours. And AJ, who's become a very good friend, he organises the event. I said, "How much further is it, AJ? We're on another ferry." He said, "Oh, it's all right. This is the last ferry. Off this ferry, it's just a straight run to the hotel." I'm like, "Oh, good. How far?" He goes, "About 5.5 hours." I'm joking. got there at 11 o'clock at night. Got there to find out that there was a journalist who wanted a test drive the next morning, and we had to get that out of the way before the event started again at 8 o'clock. So I was up at 6 o'clock to go and give him a test drive. But it was wonderful driving. Got some great images. We had a photographer along with us. Just being in the car all day, every day. I got so comfortable and familiar with it, the way Alex must feel in the car. It just become just an extension of me, and just accelerating the gear shifts when I'd use the clutch when I wouldn't. It just all just become second nature. It became like balancing. It became subconscious. It was just a wonderful trip. There's loads more, but I
was going to say, I feel like you three could talk about this for hours and hours.
Well, we
and
definitely
hours, really.
could.
Absolutely. Alex, going back to the Mono Owners Club. So what made you start it in the first place? And obviously, what have we got to look forward to?
Well, the idea came basically from having the car and meeting some of the guys, and I just thought it would be nice to have a small structure. I mean, I met some of the guys on the tracks, and then I spoke to the guys at BAC, and I said, well, every cool car company has a club, so why don't we do that? And the two guys said, yeah, well, don't bother us, just do whatever you want, and just take it from there. Yeah, and that's what we did, and it's all on a very small basis, but we're trying to do something more and something bigger. I mean, the community is growing. We've got 125 cars or so out in the world, and then I'm trying to get them somehow. I mean, they're all across the world, so it's not that easy, but we're working on that. We're having our end of season party at the 2nd of December at BAC. They've offered us to host it there, so we've invited every mono owner. I'm still inviting them. I'm still trying to get more people from across the world to join us on that event, where we're going to try to lay out the vision of the coming years. We're planning some trips for next year. So we've planned definitely 2 European trips. We've planned 2 trips for the UK, and working on a solution the trip solution for the United States. And so big plans and big ideas, and let's see what we can make happen.
It must be really cool to see, like, we spoke earlier about the community that is mono sort of thing. It must be so cool seeing everyone come together from around the world at your events.
Yeah, definitely, and it's like Neill said earlier, it's a very wide typology, it's a very wide style of people that come together. Some of them own only 2 cars, some of them own 30 or 40 or 50 cars. Some are more wealthy, some are less wealthy. It's a cool thing. It's not so much about fitting into a certain box, but fitting into the box of owning a very, very special car and the joy of driving. I think that's the thing that connects everyone. The joy of driving and enjoying the sport and the technique about driving, and that's basically what it's all about, and the rest doesn't really matter that much.
Alex, thank you so much for joining us on the BAC podcast today. I wish you many more happy miles in mono and with the Mono Owners Club. And that's a wrap, guys. So another really interesting episode. Thanks to everyone from around the world for joining us, as always. Next time out, we're talking all things technology and looking at what the future of the automotive industry could look like and where mono will be playing its part. We'll see you then.